Hello, folks. Welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. Hope you're doing well, and I appreciate you tuning in. Try to switch up the monologue a little bit here in the beginning. It is 8:50 in the morning as I'm recording this. I have not had coffee or tea of any kind yet, but it's a very sunny, pleasant, brisk, cold New York City morning, and as I'm sure you may have gathered through my conversations recently, there is nobody on the streets right now, and I'm recording this before I hop over to my very short commute to my day job, which is my work computer over on the couch. So we're still making the best of it up here in New York City. Today on the show is a conversation that probably should have happened a lot sooner. But it happened now, and I'm glad for it. My guest on the show is my really close friend, Leo Quinn. Leo Quinn, you have heard be mentioned in a lot of other interviews on this show as my former bandmate in my band in college, Edge of Memory. He also listens to my show frequently and always has some useful insights. And whenever I have a question about spirituality or religion, he's sort of like my de facto spirit. I'll call him the de facto spiritual advisor, question answerer for Between Awesome and Disaster. But me and Leo have known each other for almost 15 years, and even though we don't see each other in person very often, it's one of those friendships that never continues to stay strong despite distance. And we love a lot of the same music. If you listen to my episodes with Paul Cohen, which you might have another one soon, in the midst of COVID-19, I really spark up when I get to talk about the same kind of music that I like with people. And Leo is one of those people, and we wrote a bunch of songs together, and you're going to hear us talk about that stuff as well as kind of his life, because he's lived all over the United States, and it was really pleasant to get to chat with him. So we're going to get to that in a second. Also, if you guys are at all, I want to put this out there because I feel comparatively as if my position in life, I currently feel like I'm faring pretty well. But I would love to hear from you guys to see how you're doing, how you're faring amidst COVID-19. I don't know if your city where you live has shut down like New York has, but I would love to hear from you. And if you're enjoying listening to the show, I would also love to hear from you. Maybe we could read some comments in the intro monologue here. So if you enjoy listening to this show and know a friend who needs some things to listen to, we're available on all the major streaming platforms: Apple, Stitcher, Spotify. You can use the promo code AWESOME, all caps, and get a free month of Stitcher Premium, which might be helpful for anyone during this time. And I'm on Twitter at Comic Will Carey, and that's about all I've got for right now. Yeah, it is. So let's go to my chat with my friend Leo Quinn. Leo Quinn.
Will Carey.
All right, I think it's working. Good to hear from you, man. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. It's actually rainy here in New York, so people are actually staying inside, which is a welcome change from what I saw over the weekend.
I bet it is. It's actually like been I don't want to call it like a drizzle. It's been more of a steady rain that's like kind of pleasant and really polleny here, and the rain washes that away, so I'm in favor of it.
That's good to hear. Yeah, up here it's kind of that sort of ominous foreboding kind of rain, like Silent Hill esque.
Yeah, that's a perfect comparison. You just brought me back to like video game world, a la like early 2000s.
hmm now, people who are listening to this, I'm recording, by the way, Leo.
You always are already recording. You're professional like that.
Yeah, I try. So, to those of you that aren't listening that can't see this, so I don't have my video on, but Leo has his on, and You're growing what I would describe as like an indie rock beard, is what it looks like, dude.
Yeah, that's a fair. That's yeah. I hadn't really thought of it as the indie beard, but that is accurate.
Yeah, I think if we get you a flannel shirt and a working knowledge of whiskey, you could fit in. You could I could drop you into Brooklyn and you could get by. Well,
There you go.
maybe not right now, but
Yeah,
someday.
no, don't make, so in North Carolina right now, there's only 300 cases, maybe a little more than that, and where I am specifically, there's only three. So I'm like good.
Hmm.
Yeah, don't put me in Brooklyn right now. I wouldn't like my chances if I was in Brooklyn at the moment. So,
Yes, yes, because I just saw on the news, New York has 35% of all the cases in of coronavirus or COVID-19 in the U.S. at this present moment. Yet,
gotcha.
and we're currently number three in the world, behind Italy and China for total cases. So that kind of leads into my first question: is how are you faring mentally and physically right now? Are you still like going out, or have you been just like in your apartment?
Sure, no, good question. So, I'm still going to work. Things here are decently normal, comparable to like Lucy and her family are in the Bay Area, so it's like they're basically on lockdown. Like they can go outside sometimes, but that's about it. And then Grace and her family are in Bullhead City, Arizona, and I just actually talked to her, and like life is pretty like normal. Um, and then my parents are in Winter Park, near the Orlando area in Florida, and they're under a curfew. They can't be outside from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. right now. So, um,
Oh, exciting.
my yeah, my situation's pretty calm and serene comparably to those locations. But really, the only major thing here is just like with a hurricane, everyone here flipped with the news of the arrival of the virus and flocked to their Food Lions, their Aldis, their Harris Teeters, their Publix, whatever chain you want to name. And when I went to get groceries a few days ago here, all the meat was gone, all the cleaning supplies were gone, and all the milk and bread was gone. So like the latter I expected, but like everything else, I was just like, good lord, this is nuts. So, but yeah, so that's. But personally, I'm fine. I'm pretty good at remaining calm in situations like this.
Yeah, I'm basically I've always kind of had the feeling of like, if it's gonna get me, it's gonna get me. Um,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, and the thing like with this compared to other like big world events that have hit New York City like 9/11 or Hurricane
Yeah.
Sandy, the way this feels differently is that there during those events there was still this sense of like coming togetherness, and it was also a visible threat. This is an invisible threat, and either everyone's like openly kind of suspicious of like the slightest cough if you're outdoors, or because it was really nice here on Saturday, openly defying all practical and smart advice. And people are playing basketball and volleyball, and and you got to be really close to do all those things.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's a very reactionary vibe, and seeing the different forms of it is really kind of fascinating, just like at a scale of human behavior, for sure.
Exactly. I wanted to ask you this because I see you as sort of the spiritual advisor of Between Awesome and Disaster.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
sure.
because
Yeah.
now because you've not only been my friend for over like what is it, like 10 or 15 years now?
Oh,
It's a long time.
man, it's been a while. 2005, 2006, I think is when we first met.
Yeah, yeah, like
Yeah.
that sounds about right because I remember I was living at my old apartment in Cockeysville, Maryland,
Oh,
and
yes. Yep.
um and you not only have we known each other for a really long time, and I kind of want to trace that also, uh
Yeah.
but you actually like you're one of the people that tells me they listen to the show regularly, and you're also you being a man of faith. Does this relate to what you're saying now? Are there any biblical parallels? Is this the end of days? Are the four horsemen of the apocalypse drawing near?
Um, perhaps the four horsemen of the Clydesdale Budweiser are, based off of the alcohol purchased in different stores that I've been to. But no, that's actually a valid question. And to answer your question, to answer it straightforwardly, no. Like this does not mean that like God hates us or something like that. If anything, I take all of this as a welcomed embrace of the maybe necessary return to some quiet and some like effort of actually slowing things down a little bit. Um, and you're in New York, you know that far more than I do, but I can't help but think that maybe this is just like an invitation to like reconnect with people in a different way, but also it's a time to finally read that book that you've been wanting to read, to reach out to like that childhood friend that you haven't spoken to in years, or it's also a time to like really check in with family and be like, hey, how are you with all of this? Like, I know we can't be there person to person, but we can still bond over this because we are literally in this together. Like that's never been true. Or like High School Musical got it. That was very prophetic.
Yeah, that's the excellent silver lining to it. The way I've the way I'm maintaining my sanity is just continuing to keep those connections, despite the
Yeah.
fact that we're all isolating.
Hmm.
Well, I'll tell you one interesting thing that I've noticed since I've in the past over the past few weeks. So I'm sure you heard that restaurants in New York can only do takeout and delivery. You can't sit and eat and right now. So
Yeah. Right. Same with us actually. We you restaurants you can't go into, it's just takeout or delivery. And then today hair salons were shut down too. So that's the development.
yes, they shut down hair and nail salons recently
Mhm.
up here. Also, the big one was when they shut down bowling alleys. Bowling alleys were still happening, and then and
Oh,
then
I didn't know that.
and then
Okay.
and then
Okay.
they had
Wow.
to specifically issue a thing for bowling alleys. So this is what I'm doing to uh, I guess to so I don't end up like very cabin fever esque, like that episode of Simpsons where Burns and Homer end up snowed in a cabin. Can you tell I just got Disney Plus? I did.
God, nice reference.
um, so to kind of trace this a little bit, so I know we've talked about your origins before, but like
Yeah.
you are sort of like I view you as you're very kind of omnipresent and all over the place, but you specifically have what I'd call that sort of like Midwestern niceness as like your overall personality. But I don't know if you're actually were born and raised in the Midwest.
Right. No, so I relate to many of your past guests in this. I think you've talked to several people who have kind of moved around like I have. So born and raised in Chicago. So mind you, I have to be specific here as a Chicagoan. I'm not from Chicago, Chicago. I'm from the northwest suburbs. I've heard several of your previous guests make that very valid point.
Right.
I was born in Evanston, so that's where Sean of she's the host of Hot Ones. That's where he was born too.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
little bond there.
Uh huh.
And yeah, lived in Chicago, specifically Hinsdale and then Naperville. Naperville is the one that everyone knows now. Until I was in eighth grade, then moved to Dallas, Texas. Lived in a suburb called Flower Mound. Then moved to Baltimore, Maryland for my senior year. And then um, after that, went to college. That didn't work out, came back. And then I met a certain fellow tall human being named Will Carey while working at Target.
Yes, that is how you and I know each other. So you were on your like third major city by the time I ran into you, and I was still just crawling out of like the and I can't remember if I've said this to you or not. I found out recently that St. Leonard, where I'm from, is not actually even a town or a hamlet. It's a census designated place. That's something I've been grappling with over the last few weeks. In that I am just from a, I don't, because like the get out of this small town, that's like a trope in the music you and I listen to. But I'm
Mhm.
not even from a town. I'm just from a big enough cluster of humans that the government's involved. That's what
Yeah, so it's like yeah, so it's like Big Brother isn't even watching. He's like maybe taking a peek every few months to make sure like nothing's like burning, kind of thing. But yeah, no, you've mentioned that on your recent episodes, and I had never heard of that designation until you mentioned it. So that says something.
yeah, and and that was a downgrade from the where I grew up from like birth to 10 because Lesby was at least an unincorporated community.
That sounds like a like you're an anti-flag fan, so like unincorporated community sounds like a B-side they would have written.
Right. Yeah, definitely sounds like unincorporated community could have like opened for Minor Threat in the 80s.
Yes, or they would have like collaborated and had like a weird band child with something corporate or something like that.
Exactly. And so I was in college at the time at Towson University, and I was
Yep.
I think that job I had at Target was maybe my like third like paying job I'd ever had because I was at Kmart for a summer before that. I was at Walden Books, rest in peace, for a
Yeah.
semester before that, and then because I hit a certain point where I was like, I need to work and also study, and that's where we run into each other. So
Yeah.
and why did you move around so much growing up?
Right. No, so everyone assumes, understandably so, that I come from a military family, but I don't. You've met my parents, you know that they are
I have,
working
yeah.
people. So, my dad and my mom, initially it was my mom. My mom was the one who was actually kind of the breadwinner for the first, like maybe half a decade of their marriage, but now they've been married for 35 years. So my dad just got different jobs and different opportunities arose. So initially, when he graduated or when he was about to graduate from Notre Dame, there were like scouts on campus from Montgomery Ward, and that's how we got his first job. And
Mm-hmm.
then Montgomery Ward transitioned into Sears, which is based in Chicago. That's like the formerly known as Sears Tower.
Uh-huh.
And then that fell. Then Sears was basically falling through. So my dad very wisely left Sears, and how they're still around boggles my mind. It's amazing. And then Foot Action USA, which is like a rival of Foot Locker, was what brought us to Dallas. And then that was about to go through. I think it's still there, but like it's not as strong as it was. And then Joseph A. Bank, the competitor of like Men's Warehouse, brought him to Baltimore. And
Mm-hmm.
then my parents, after Baltimore, moved to Scottsdale, Arizona, and they were there for 7 years. And that was PetSmart that my dad worked with. And now my dad is with Red Lobster, and they're actually I haven't told you this. I don't think they're looking to move back to Arizona right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they they miss it. They were just out there too, visiting my sister Grace, her husband, and their daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're very intentional about getting back there. But my dad has the good fortune of he can pretty much work anywhere. I think he's going to try to get something remote. Um, and live with my mom and basically set up the path towards retirement back in Arizona, which is correct for them. That's like the place that I think they felt the most comfortable living in. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
yeah,
I know a few people from Arizona, and my other friend Chris, he spent some time when he was in college out in Tempe, which I hear is very very nice. If I
it
was
is.
if I was I feel like if I didn't have all this, even though I culturally I think where I grew up is very southern and feel, I still have a lot of this East Coast energy. If I was tempted by nicer weather, I feel like I would be more open to like the living in the Southwest, or if like my job didn't like the business I'm in didn't depend on uh, being in New York, I would probably be more attracted to living other places, I guess.
Yeah, you would do really well, and actually Chelsea would really like a Tempe too. But there's a pace to New York that can like the only place I've ever been that was close to New York is Chicago. Chicago has like a very close vibe, but it's also like the guy on your podcast today, the gentleman from In It Over It, talking about it. He really nailed it because like
Mm-hmm.
geographically it's far away because like besides Chicago, like the rest of Illinois is pretty scattered.
Yeah.
So it's like the epicenter. And like think of it this way: when Oprah left Chicago, a lot of people I think maybe tuned out of Chicago briefly, but then they went back to it, remembering that the music scene there and like Lollapalooza and the food, like culturally, it's just like a mecca. And it's like aside from New York, it's I think the coolest city that I've been to in the country. But I'm also partially biased in saying that.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I
Yeah.
would say of major cities I've been in the United States, it's like in my definitely in my top five for sure. Granted, I haven't spent a ton of time in Los Angeles. I was supposed to, uh,
Right.
but then coronavirus happened.
Oh, you were heading out. You were going to be heading out to LA,
Yeah,
really?
yeah. I was gonna be out there for a few days, and then
Okay.
we had to, things changed.
No,
uh,
I relate. So through part of my work, I was actually headed to Mexico. I was supposed to be there now, and that didn't happen either. When I'm glad that the person who was coordinating the trip canceled it like a month ago in anticipation of everything. But yeah, so that'll be rescheduled for the fall. But yeah, I was going to be out of country, and I would have been stuck there for probably a very long time. So
Yeah. Although there is a part of me that would like to, the version of Leo Quinn that gets stuck for an indeterminate amount of time in Mexico. I wonder what that would have turned you into. I think that would have been interesting.
So, as you know, and as Chelsea knows, I've been learning Spanish for 3 years. So I think I maybe would have gotten by, but I would have emerged like fully bilingual, just like taking on the world and impressing my colleagues, that kind of thing. So,
Exactly. And then by the time we ran into each other, zoning or pulling frozen meals to the front of the cooler, so that they could be knocked down by capitalism within a few hours. I remember the first kind, because I tended to not like make a ton of conversation at work at those jobs, because I was just kind of there to get my like scrap my $8 an hour and then go home and sleep.
yeah.
Um,
Mm.
but there, I remember we started talking because I can't remember exactly why I was compelled to bring this up, but I remember asking you who you thought was heavier musically, not better, just sonically heavier, which was the Rolling Stones or Aerosmith. And I thought Aerosmith because they use more distortion than the Rolling Stones do.
Yeah, and that was literally my thought. And as you're recalling this story, we were zoning the frozen food section doing
Yes.
this, and it occurs to me right now, like had I said Rolling Stone, like as the answer, would we still be friends?
I don't know. I think we still would have been, because
Yeah, yeah,
what really locked that in is when I was like, oh yeah, but my favorite bands are like Blink 182, Plus 44,
right.
Angels and Airwaves,
Yeah,
Newfound Glory, Green Day, and he's like, dude, those are all of my favorite bands.
yeah. You
Uh,
were like among one of the first like fellow men that I had known. That as soon as those bands emerged from your mouth, it was like this aha, clouds parting, angel choir singing moment. I was like, what? So yeah, you're right. Had I said Rolling Stones, which I easily would not have because I've really never been into them as a band. Um, but yeah, Aerosmith was to me was just like the obvious answer, and fortunately, it was the right one. So.
exactly. And pop punk and punk and pop punk specifically, I think, not unlike metal or other rock genres, when you find somebody else who's into that style as well, that's like that's like stronger than like blood relationships, I
No,
think.
it really is. It makes you like, um, and like the brother I never had, or something like that, in a punk pop pure sense, which is again, like especially now that we're in our 30s and we're still listening to that stuff, it's become even rarer. Like it's kind of
Yeah.
sad. But then you have songs that are coming out like that new Newfound Glory song, the
Mhm.
greatest of all time. I heard that and I was just like, oh, this still exists. Cool. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And Newfound Glory especially, and I talk about this with frequent pop punk a friend of mine, Paul Cohen.
Yeah.
Newfound Glory are one of the few bands from like the early 2000s pop punk scene that pretty much continued to play that style, and they don't have like any weird experimental albums. The closest they came to was Coming Home, which
Right.
has a lot more piano and acoustic guitar, but if you actually like listen to the songs, I think it maintains the same like tempo. It's just kind of a slower version of what they do.
Yeah, it's like their introspective version. It's kind of like what Reliant K did with like Forget and Not Slow Down.
Yes. I always thought my favorite Reliant K album was always mm-hmm. I thought that was because that was around that same time
Yeah.
that Blink when the Untitled album came out, and then
Yeah.
all of the other acolytes of Blink, because I feel like Green Day were like the most influential pop punk band for the early 90s, and then Blink for the late 90s. And
Yeah.
all of the acolytes of Blink kind of had, oh, that's a good idea also. So you can do different sounding things, and you can experiment and still be a pop punk band or a punk band.
Yeah.
And
No,
maybe genre doesn't even matter.
yeah, no, I think you're right. And so piggybacking off what you just said with Blink in the late 90s, totally. I think the main thing that's had them stand apart to me from Green Day was especially in Enema of the State, they had so many like Tom had so many guitar like fill-ins. Like I think of like the opening riff of Dumpweed or like the simple palm muted part of Aliens Exist, like that kind of thing wasn't as present in early 90s Green Day. It was more just like pure power chord driven, which was cool and it worked. But Blink brought a whole new level of like the stringy kind of guitar riff to the forefront that just blew my mind when I heard it.
Yeah, I agree. Like Tom DeLonge during that era, his guitar playing, he's never really played solos, but that was during his like Descendant Screeching Weasel kind of influence play. So it's lots of like
Yeah,
really fast runs on like one or two strings.
right.
Compared to later on when he started doing more octaves and stuff.
Oh
Um,
yeah, no, it's funny because like um, I think back right now to oh God, what's the name of the song? Carousel, and how that has like a really, prominent, dun, 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 like really like in your face solo, like, but
yeah,
that's like about as solo-ish as Tom ever got. And then you fast forward to like feeling this, and it's purely just like octaves up and down the
yeah.
D string. So
Yeah, exactly. And I still have not quite gotten the hand of doing octave runs like that. Uh,
mm,
I always, whenever I try to do it, it never quite sounds right except for a couple of occasions. But
right.
like listening to like again our other brethren from the Baltimore area, All Time Low. Uh,
Oh yes.
Jack always Jack's octave lines always sounded really great for the song without needing to like do the single riffy thing or do solos.
If you want, that's a really good example. Immediately, what comes to mind is if you listen to what Jack does in the chorus of 6 Feet Under the Stars, it's like a really beautiful melodic accompaniment to what Alex is doing with the rhythm. And that really impressed me when that record came out. And now with their newer singles, like even in like Getaway Green, there's like a simple like I think it's like 7/9 to 9/11. Just like chord progression. Like I'm just picturing that octave as you slide down to it, almost like what Tom does with um, Asthenia or whatever the hell that name of that song was off of the Untitled
Yep,
record.
I know the one you're talking about. The one that has
Yeah,
all of the
yeah,
phase in the beginning. The should I go
yeah,
back? Should I go back? Should I?
yeah, yeah. That was where they got where Tom's full-fledged UFO stuff was really emerging. Like it was hinted at earlier, especially like aliens exist and all that, but that was when it was like, oh, okay, this is really coming out full swing, isn't it? So,
Yeah, exactly. Like that was the first their other personalities were kind of emerging, because I guess I read a little bit. I guess there was a lot of tension when they were doing "Take Off Your Pants and Jacket," because
yeah,
the record label
I
was basically pressuring them to make Enema of the State like part two.
Right. No, I read that article too, the same one you did, and I was stunned to hear that they had basically written the record, and then the record the studio is, or what do you call it? The label.
The
That's it.
label, yeah.
I know terms. Um, so, um, the label was like, we need like a radio hit, and then they went off and wrote Rock Show and First Date.
Yeah, and I think just kind of like little thought just kind of banged those out, and it's so crazy how like something that you put tons of effort, you can put tons of effort and thought into one song, and then the
Yep.
song that you just kind of I'm not saying the half-assed it, but the song that comes together really quickly goes on to be a classic. The same way with Paranoid by Black Sabbath. They basically needed a 2-minute filler for the album, and we're like,
Right.
okay, I got this. I'm like, okay, I'll go. Give me 15 minutes. I'll write the lyrics, and then they're still playing that song. They were still playing that song like 40 years after writing it. It's just
Yeah, no,
us.
it's and as you and I know from writing our own songs and being in the band together. By the way, to Will's listeners, I'm that guy who was in Edge of Memory with Will.
Yes, yes. Leo Quinn was the other half of my band in college called
Yep.
Edge of Memory. Um,
Yep.
before we get into that, I am curious what was
Yeah.
your exposure to pop punk? What was your like? What was the like? The clouds part and the light shining down moment for you.
Sure. So I think back to being in eighth grade in Naperville, Illinois, and it was when I heard All the Small Things and Adam song that I was just like, I don't know what this is, but I'm here for it. And prior to that, I really didn't listen to like a ton of music with the exception of the songs that and the bands that my parents listened to. So like you can imagine my mom like blasting Shania Twain, like that was how she rolled.
Sure.
And then my dad was just classic Beatles, Zeppelin, um, let's see here, Styx,
James
Queen.
Taylor Journey.
Yeah, Queen was huge. Like we had my dad had the two the red and the blue colored albums with like the Queen's greatest hits, and those were staples.
Yep.
Like I didn't like I remember hearing Bohemian Rhapsody and not remembering the title of it for a long time, but I like remember thinking this song is more than just like a song. This is like an experience. And same with Stairway. Like I don't care how cliche it is, that song is like perfect.
Oh yeah, as far as composition goes, I
Yeah,
didn't appreciate that song the first time I heard it. My dad played it for
yeah,
me, and I thought it was boring. But I
yeah.
appreciate the compositional genius of that song now.
Oh yeah, and there's a lot of songs that the great example I always give is when I first heard Adele's "Someone Like You," I was like, okay, this is kind of boring. And then when you live what that song is about, you're just like, oh, this is brilliant. Good on you, Adele, for capturing like how that emotion feels. So
Totally, yeah. Pop music is respectable now.
it is. It's weird. I don't know
Yeah,
how that happened, but it did.
yeah. Well, the cool thing is that like everybody who's doing like pop and rap now, like a lot, they grew up listening to not only that stuff, but they grew up listening to the stuff we listen to, and they just are
Yes.
incorporating all of these different influences and making really interesting different stuff. So even if like I'm resisting trying to become the old man screaming at the cloud, just being like, "There's no guitars on the radio anymore." It's all
Yeah.
still happening, but what's popular now is different but cool, and I'm trying not to shut my mind off to it. So we start the band, and I was in my uh, I looking back on how I was in Edge of Memory, I was kind of a lot more of a control freak, I think, than I am in my current band. Um, so you and I start the band, and then we get Matt, and then we kind of have this ever rotating cast of characters on drums.
Yep.
Um, the thing I always liked about you as a writer, I thought you were a better at the time, definitely a better lyricist than I was, and I was just kind of throwing a bunch of different stuff at the wall and trying to make it work. What I like about you, Leo Quinn, is that you had the ability to. I would just, if I was stuck on something, I would just say, like, "Hey, man, I got these chords and these parts. I don't know how it fits together. Could you fix it? And you're like, yeah. And then like, here's the song. I'm like, okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, the that song "Off the Map" is that's like how it came together. You were playing us that riff in your apartment, and I was just like, I like that. Could I like write lyrics to it? And then like the next day at Target, I was bored out of my mind at the electronics booth, and I wrote the lyrics on receipt paper.
Hmm.
So
The way all great songs are written during
yeah, no,
boredom
it's
and
true.
on non-traditional paper. Um,
Yeah, no, but to your point, I guess I've always been a really big fan of collaboration. And when you move as much as I have, you learn to adapt very quickly to different personalities and you go with the flow much more
right.
readily. Um, so by the time you and I crossed paths and we were making music, that was already like innate within me. And so it made like whenever you couldn't quite figure it out, you had another ear. And likewise, when I couldn't figure something out, then you had a good idea. So it was a good meshing of that. And you also had more of a love for other bands that I wasn't as into at the time, like your Anti-Flags or kind of like your more like rebellious, um,
Yeah,
like
I think I always had more of a toe in like uh quote unquote real punk, I'll call it traditional punk is what I think a better term
right.
is.
You can call it real punk. You can be pretentious about it. It's okay.
Uh, I'm trying not to be. You know, gatekeeping doesn't help anybody. You got to let everybody in.
For sure.
But I always had more of a toe in harder in heavier and harder music, I think, than you did. You had the more pop sensibilities compared.
Yeah, that's true. I was way more like interested in like um really almost like flowery lyricism with like really cool verses and then really melodic big choruses. That's just always been what I am drawn to.
Hmm.
Um but I think the cool thing with being in the band with you was you wrote riffs that were really simplistic. Like even last night when I was working on my own like new stuff, I was doing the riff for Illusion of Progress,
Uh huh.
and I was just like, that was a badass riff. Like it's so simple. It's just drop D and it's like three chords, but it works.
Oh, thanks, man. I've turned that
Yeah.
song into a complete. That song, I'm now playing in. I took I took that riff, put it in standard, changed it up a little bit, and it's now a bright ugly song.
Oh, cool. Good on you. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it was one that I tried so hard to make work in another like songwriting collaboration I had, but I just could never get it done. And then I banged it out. Again, writing the lyrics like on while I was eating a sandwich at my desk.
Yeah,
Um,
no, it's weird. I think and as you know lately diving back into the songwriting world, when I stop thinking so hard about it and really focus on just what a riff is feeling as far as tone goes and just like kick back and relax a little bit, the ideas flow more readily. Of course, you have the occasional moment where it's just like this gift basket from the lyricist musical gods and you don't know how to explain it, it just hits you. But those I think are fewer and far between moments.
I agree. Something I found helpful in terms of songwriting. I don't know if you've ever seen this video, but there's a fun video of Dave Grohl and Kyle Gass from Tenacious D at some like European festival. They're like hanging out in a trailer, and Dave Grohl's talking about like how to write hits because like he says like the deep cuts don't keep the mansion going. So the way he thinks about it is like most white people groove to the lyrics. So think of it like a bumper sticker, and then he just says "Life's a bitch," and then he just starts playing like D C G on a guitar, and he's like "Life's a bitch, but keep on trucking," and then you just have to like you don't even have to really change the chords. You just go like pre-chorus, chorus, chorus, verse, kind of chorus. That's something I'm trying to do lately is doing like shorter verses.
Yeah.
That's something I'm working on with one of the other songs, One Missed Call, patreon.com/awesome disaster. Um, and
Yes.
is because I've sent that to you a lot. I've sent you like 5 different versions of that song, and
Yeah.
the next one I send you, the verses are going to be like uh, 2 passes instead of 4, I think, so that we can get to the money parts faster.
Yeah, so one thing, it's cool that you say that because I sent you like the most recent song I've done, and one thing
Yes.
I'm super conscious of lately is so there's a term in writing called kill your darlings, where you get rid of the things that you love but that don't need to be there.
Right.
So I'm always big on music that fills the space that it needs to fill. Um, the one grudge I have against like Angels and Airwaves is that Tom didn't know when to like cut an intro down from 10 minutes to like two or something like that. Um,
Right,
or
right.
same with like, I mean, mind you, I think right now of like the outro of the adventure and how it's like an extra 3 minutes. But for a
Mhm.
song like that, he makes the point that there's a lot to contemplate after a song that sends a message like that. Whereas True Love, that song has like, the 4 minute long intro.
Yeah.
And
I
I
love that
remember the
song.
first time I remember the first time I heard that song, I was like, I mean, this is cool, but like you could have cut this in half and still had a great song, man. Like
Oh,
it's interesting.
yeah. I still have a soft spot for that just because I love the build up to it, like with the chanting.
Oh no, totally. And like, don't get me wrong. I love the song, but like from like a critical songwriting perspective, that could be cut in half. But I'm right there with you. That song is amazing. I really love it.
Oh, totally. And rap nowadays are, I think, killing darlings like left and right. They've gotten it down to like a science. Like all of the emo rappers and the SoundCloud rappers, all the trap metal guys. I don't know if any of the words I'm saying make any sense to anyone
Oh,
listening to this.
they really do. So like one thing I've really noticed in the worlds of like Chance the Rapper and Kendrick Lamar and Big Sean and rappers like that, they have learned. And actually, I also have Nicki Minaj and Cardi B out there a little bit too.
Yeah.
There's like a level of formula to what they do, um, from like in part because
Oh, did I?
know the rhythm and beat of your song in order to fill the time of it. But then there's also a level of instrumental to it that allows for structure, and that's really cool. And like that's one thing I really miss in the current state of like punk pop or pop punk, whatever the hell you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
Some bands out there, maybe it's just this is me now being the old man yelling at the cloud, like "Get off my damn lawn, you fake people!" but um, but like I think that there's like I think of bands like 5 Seconds of Summer, who I like some of their music. Don't get me wrong, but some of it is just too sugar coated for my liking, and that's nothing against them. Like they're doing way better as musicians than I'd ever be. So like hats off, but um, it's just not as substantive as it could be, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, I could see that. Those they're in there. They're still in their like summer fun time
That's true, they are.
era.
And I don't mean to what I feel like I'm picking on 5 Seconds of Summer. Like I'm gonna get all the just like BTS's army would come after haters. I like the people in Australia who love 5 Seconds of Summer are gonna like come after me now.
Oh,
But
I
no,
could, if we could draw the ire of the 5 Seconds to Summer fan base, this will be the most successful podcast I've ever done. Uh,
that's there you go. Yeah,
um,
that demographic that you really are just griping for.
exactly. So Edge of Memory is happening. We play a couple shows around Baltimore now. I'm curious what happens to you because during this time, because I know there was a period of time where I wasn't really too clued into what you were up to. So I'm trying to fill in some blanks here. So you ended up in Iowa
I
after
did.
Maryland, and what's going on there? I know nothing about Iowa.
So, I went to Iowa. I transferred into school there. Went to St. Ambrose University. You've never heard of it. It's okay. And it's a private liberal arts school. And I majored in English. And then I was a teacher for eighth grade for like a year, and then got the hell out of that. And then, um,
Congratulations.
yeah. Um, and this is all circa like 2010, 2011. So this is like 10 years ago now.
Hmm.
Um, and at the time had just gotten out of like a 3 year relationship, and then I moved to Arizona, and then I worked for University of Phoenix online. Lived with my mom and dad for a bit, and then moved back to the Midwest. Um, Got into a job with campus ministry at Western Illinois University. Did that for 3 years, and then now I'm out here in North Carolina doing the big show.
Uh-huh. And 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 I want to make, and I guess I kind of understand what your jobs have been, cuz
Yeah.
like I think Chelsea for a little time thought you were like a preacher or a minister or something,
Oh God.
but
Yeah.
that's
Sure.
but I always thought your job was more of like, well, no, he's like the like cool youth crew guy. He's the one who would like show up to guitar and play like that Jars of Clay song, and then say like, well, you know, there's actually a lot of like biblical parallels in the Marvel Comics universe. So
Totally. No.
we're gonna watch Iron Man. We're gonna watch Iron Man as a metaphor for the redemption of Christ.
That's right. And we're gonna watch. Yeah, we're gonna. Oh, what was the example I was just gonna give as a joke? I was gonna be like, we're gonna listen to the biblical themes that arise in the workings of Paramore, Reliant K, Under Oath, and other quasi-Christian bands, that kind of thing. But
Exactly. But
no,
what?
so my role at the church right now is coordinator of youth ministry, which like it's really hard to define what the role is when I get like a haircut, because they'll be like, "Oh, so what do you do?" And I always narrow it down to I retweet what the Pope says, and I operate all of our social media, our website, and then my basic thing is like I help a lot with our social justice initiatives,
Uh huh.
and that ties into what's called confirmation. So anyone out there who's Catholic knows what I'm talking about. And you're in New York, so you have a lot of Catholics there. But
Yeah,
as you
we got
know
a lot of
quite
everybody
well,
here.
yeah, I'm not one of those Catholics that's like ever going to be shoving my faith in your face. I think that's inappropriate. I think that if anyone has any belief, whether it's spiritual or belief in a higher power or whatever they want to call it, that is their decision to make and their path to follow. And I have total respect for the different ways about which people do that. Um, but yeah, so and mind you, it's mostly rooted in the fact that that's how I was born and raised. And
Right.
it's also just been part of my daily routine. It's just how I operate. It's just how I roll. And I will say, like, in the midst of like this whole COVID-19 thing, it's weird. Like, it's a really bizarre back and forth between what this is all about. But I've found solace in the fact that I think that if you look at it through the lens of an invitation to be in some silence for a bit, then it's really not a bad thing. But of course, um, you still pause and wonder, like, what is all of this, and where is God in the midst of all of this? We're getting all um, like kind of akin to the image that Chelsea has of what I do.
No, no, sure. Well, this is the kind of conversation that like I imagine like you know during college, you know, when we're just like we would like, you know, pull into like an empty parking lot and stare at the sky and just be like,
Oh,
man,
totally.
what's
Yeah.
out there, man?
Yeah.
Also,
Why are we here? What's the point? What's the meaning of our existence? All that stuff for sure.
exactly, which I like to do to a certain point, but I think if you do that too much, you might. I, I sometimes veer towards what I call cheerful nihilism, where I'm just like, hey man, everything's great because none of it really matters.
Yeah, no, and I think that's totally valid. Honestly, like I am 100% here to listen to everyone's viewpoint. I think the only line I cross is when one, it gets towards like conspiracy theorism. I'm not, I want nothing to do with that. And two, I steer away from what's called fundamentalism, where you take scripture literally. I think that's dangerous. So,
Yeah, I would agree with that also because that stuff was written a really long time ago, and a lot of things are very different now. So if you don't know the context with which it was written, that could lead to some really wacky like laws getting made or decisions
oh
made.
yeah.
Uh, So yeah, and I think that's always been like while we work as friends is because even if you and I don't agree on everything, we're not going to intentionally push each other's buttons.
No, and I've met plenty of people just in the state of North Carolina who hugely disagree with me because they come from a very fundamentalist or Baptist or some other form of Protestantism background, and that doesn't bother me. I mean, we can find a place to agree to disagree, and that's totally permissible. You don't have to like be the victor in every argument that you have.
Yeah, it's kind of a I don't know. I've heard this advice given a lot. Sometimes in the context of marriage, do you want to be happy or do you want to be right? I'd rather
Yeah.
just be happy. That's how I kind of operate. And then I'm also very non-confrontational, so just kind of like,
Yeah,
oh
for sure. Yeah, you're definitely very non-confrontational. That's another place where you and I get along. We're very much like we just kind of want to like be at ease and everyone just be like chill and kind of at peace around us. We've never been people who like invite conflict.
yeah, I would definitely relate to that. And how are you like in North Carolina? Do you think you're going to stay there for a while, or do you think you're going to be in a you'll get to another big city eventually?
That's a good question. I like that I can go to the mountains and to the beach here pretty readily. That's really wonderful. I've actually described where I live to my parents as like the South's version of the Midwest, meaning there's a lot of similar atmospherical and environmental feels here, without being in a really populous place like Chicago or New York. I think I've come to discover that I'm the kind of person who prefers visiting bigger cities as opposed to living in them.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually really like um, having more like land. I think there's something really peaceful and really um, what's the word I'm looking for? Really just inviting about being outside in a place that's relatively quiet or like on a hiking trail or something like that. Especially lately, I've been doing that a lot, and it's really great just to like reconnect to the outside in the midst of all this.
Yeah, because
So
you're in one of the few places where you can still go outside and not be posing a risk
yeah,
to
no,
yourself
and
or
mind you,
others.
like that's going to change. Like by whether it's this week or next, like there will be a moment where that isn't as safe to do. Now, mind you, where I live specifically, so we have three cases here, like I mentioned earlier, and Durham has like 40 or 50, and then Raleigh has like 50, and then the areas surrounding Charlotte have quite a few. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm like far away enough from all those places where we are going to be like good to be outside and like do generally normal human interaction for probably another few days, maybe another week or so. And then depending on how much this whole thing develops, then it'll change pretty much overnight. So,
Yeah, that's kind of what happened. What happened up here is that the required steps drastically increased, and I was actually kind of relieved when Bright Ugly's first our three debut shows got postponed, because
right.
by that point it started to feel irresponsible, not in like a risking personal safety way, but just in a, am I going to impact others negatively,
Right.
is kind of how I started to view it. And then I love watching Governor Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York's press conferences.
Mhm.
Uh, his Sunday one was really great because he's like, I went to New York City, and there're just so many there. He was beside himself, like it's irresponsible to be playing basketball. There's no social distancing in basketball.
Oh, God.
So
That's it's so I've only seen press conferences from, well, Cuomo has made the news with his press conferences nationally because of just how dire the situation is there. So I've
yeah.
seen some of that, and you just did a really spot on impression. So that was great. And then I've seen a couple of the Trump administration's press conferences, and I've seen our governors, and the
Hmm.
juxtaposition between the kind of calm and calamity and information dynamic of our governor and his team versus what the current administration federally has been doing is just like comical.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I was out and about getting Wendy's of all things the other
Uh-huh.
day, and I was listening to NPR's coverage of Trump answering reporters, and it was when he called out the one reporter and said like, "You aren't a real reporter," or like said you're a bad reporter or whatever it was, and I was just like, "Oof, that's rough." I was like, "Oh, that's great, awesome."
Oh yeah, yeah. It really inspires confidence that we have the correct people in charge. Or my other,
Yeah.
or my other thing with the my other issue with the vice president who got put in charge of this is that uh, outside of like the thing that would get me a million likes on Twitter is that the guy just fundamentally doesn't is skeptical of science. Uh, the other thing with him is that there was a massive HIV outbreak while he was governor of Indiana. That's the guy you want in charge of a national health crisis.
Yeah, and it's so ironic with Pence. So, and look, I don't know these people. You only hear the media coverage, so I have no clue like what they're really bringing to like the table in the Situation Room. But ironically, Pence was born and raised Catholic and then became like evangelical. So
Oh,
I know a little bit
interesting.
about his spirituality, but yeah, to your point, it's a big mistake when people of faith dismiss science when the two are meant to be compatible with one another. Like faith can inform science, and science can certainly inform faith. Like they shouldn't be at odds. They should be kind of cousins and like neighbors in the situation because if they
Mm-hmm.
work together, then better things can happen as opposed to if they just like avoid each other and dismiss one another's expertise.
That's a very interesting thought, and this is going to sound like an odd way, but I promise that this analogy I'm about to say makes sense. So, do you know how have you ever gone back and watched movies that are set in the future from like the 80s or 90s, and like we have the technology now?
Yes, yes, I have.
So I'm convinced that people who write and direct movies, they have ideas for technology, so they put them in movies, and then scientists see that and like, oh, that's a cool idea. I'm going to figure out how to make that real. So if 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 like the so if Pence wanted to like if he basically wanted like wine into water and walking on water to be real, he could just say that and then science could figure out how to make that happen.
There's gonna be a scene in a movie like 10 years from now featuring like two people that bear uncanny resemblance to Trump and Pence saying something like that, and it's gonna be like intentionally like a parody, and people are gonna take it like it'll probably be received. Actually, I should rephrase. It'll be made like a drama, kind of like when Jim Carrey made like the number 23 trying to be dramatic, and then it was received as just like high comedy.
Yeah, exactly.
I think
Um,
that's, and mind you, like, I really hope that that movie really isn't made. If anything, like, if a movie like that is made, it better be like a reboot of Sharknado or something like that. But,
I mean, we do kind of have a Sharknado administration at the moment, so that's probably not too
yeah,
far off. So something else I
mm,
wanted to ask you because we're coming in to come in for a lane here. This is something, a couple of things I want to ask you. First of all, I want to ask you. So you're writing more music again, and I'm glad that you're doing that because I always like when
yeah.
creative people get back to uh, do creative things, if especially if they haven't done it for a while. So you're writing songs. I'm curious. I'm curious. Do you have any plans for like trying to play shows again eventually, or do you want to like play with other people? I'm curious what this looks like for you.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. If I happen to meet people in my neck of the woods who are interested in that, then certainly I'm not opposed to that at all. But I think at the moment it's more of a rediscovery of the creativity that goes hand in hand with writing and with playing guitar. And I missed that. Like I more often than not in the last few years, I've just done a lot of reading. And I think I'm at the point now where I've been really inspired by some new music, and it's ignited a spark within me to get back at it, and it's been really fun. I've like just like God, the last couple of months I've written 4 or 5 new songs, and it's felt really good to just be at that craft again. I had kind of lost sight of how much fun it is.
Well, that's I'm really glad to hear you say that, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's important to engage with your creativity as an outlet. You know, some people have a wood shop, and we've got Guitar Man. So a couple more things I want to ask you. First off,
Yes.
if I record a acoustic EP while I'm in quarantine, can I put Off the Map on it?
Yeah, man, please go for it. That'd be awesome.
Cool, man. Thanks. Now, something
Yeah.
I like to ask all the music people. I asked Evan, and I also asked I've had a lot of Chicago chats. You're like my third guy from the Chicago area in the past few days.
Yeah.
Um,
We're all coming together. We're gonna emerge from this quarantine as like a new, like, big thing.
exactly. Um, Something I like to ask the music people: what's a record you're listening to right now that you think not enough people know about?
Okay, so you and I have talked a little bit about what Asia is doing with music right now, and how you've had to go to like Japanese music to refine the sound of the 90s and the
Yes,
2000s.
yes.
So I'm like hilariously into BTS right now. I don't care who hears that and who has an opinion on it. I think that they have a new single called On, and I've probably watched the music video like 70 times. I think it's just like a masterwork of choreography, cinematography, lyricism, and melody. It's just like stunningly well made. Um, and that if you had told me 5 years ago that I would listen to a song like that, I would have like told you to just screw off because there was no way. But I think it's really, really well done. And then I'm digging the new All Time Low stuff, the new Newfound Glory track.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, the Foo Fighters have new music coming out. I'm pumped for that.
Well, that's
Um,
great.
and then, but no, otherwise, um, I think, like you, I need to kind of look back at older stuff that I used to like and kind of reconnect to it. So, like, not just like 90s and 2000s stuff, but like um, the Runaways, Joan Jett, old, like one band I totally remembered a couple nights ago is the Raconteurs with Jack White. Like, I forgot how damn good they are.
Oh yeah, yeah. They are solid. I haven't been to Nashville yet, but Chelsea has, and she went by Third Man, and it's like such a cool operation. She was telling me.
I've heard it's awesome. Like, I forgot how much of a jam Study as She Goes is. Like, that song kills so hard, and
Yeah.
it's just fun.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love those songs.
Yeah. Mhm.
Talking of cool music videos, so I know I send you my favorite band from Japan like
Yeah. Oh
every other
yeah.
day. So the music video for the song "Is There Anything That Love Can Do" by Radwimps from Weathering with You. The music video itself is a truly excellent artistic achievement because the way they shoot it, it looks like it's all done in one shot, and it doesn't do the thing that music videos from movie songs from movies do that I dislike, where they just cut to clips of the movie.
Oh,
But
seriously, yeah. That's such a overdone thing.
but if you watch this music video and if you've seen the movie or know enough about the premise to know what's going on, it's really dead on. And the song is
Okay.
spectacular. I don't listen to a ton of 7 minute long like uh ballads, but this is probably one of my favorites in that category. I
Okay.
and speak and on the subject of like rock from like not quite yesteryear, so not like 80s, 90s, maybe more like early 2000s, because like when we were in Maryland, like I feel like there was a very set style to the songs that were on 98 Rock, you know? A lot of
Oh,
like
for sure.
lot of Paul Reed Smith and Schecter sponsorships. Lots of drop D riffing and like huge big choruses. There's a band in
Yeah, no, if you for sure.
Yeah, there's a band in Japan that I guess they are the first band people listen to when they get into rock in Japan, but they're called One OK Rock.
Okay.
They've got like they've got like 6 or 7 albums on Spotify, and they jam. It's like all of my favorite parts of early 2000s modern rock without any of the filler, like any without
Okay.
any of the filler dumb songs.
Interesting.
So I've really been getting into them. And another band that I didn't give too much of a chance when I first discovered them, but I've gotten into them now because I've got the time now, is the band Helmet.
Okay, God, I need to look at now, and especially in the midst of having much little or like a lot less to do. It's a good time to explore these new bands. So thank you.
Oh, absolutely, dude. If you listen to the song "Unsung" by Helmet, and you will find the template for a lot of bands in the early 2000s.
Okay, gotcha. By the way, I never properly thanked you for introducing me to Bandmate.
Oh,
Because
you're
oh my, that they are a trip. Holy crap.
yeah, you are very welcome, dude. Yeah, they kick so much ass.
Like,
I think they're
like
great.
literally the only like the lead singer I almost feel bad for because she gets so overshadowed by like just like how unbelievably good the bassist, guitarist, both like the rhythm guitarist and the lead guitarist is like not even funny how good she is.
Oh yeah, they go so hard. Like you hear they could be very easy to write off as a gimmick, but then
Yeah,
they go so hard. They go so hard,
they do.
and their songs have that. And if anyone's listening to this, check out Bandmade, spelled MAID, on the internet. They Because I know lots of guitarists that are excellent guitarists but not great songwriters, and I know lots of
Yep.
great songwriters that aren't technically proficient musicians. And I feel like
Oh, yeah.
they write amazing songs that
Yep.
really incorporate how well they can play their instruments.
Yeah, and for those listening to, the reason they're called Bandmate, actually, I'm not sure if this is why they're called that, but in all their videos, they're wearing maid things, so it's kind of like a big middle finger to the patriarchy, kind of, and it's fabulous.
Yeah, if you go to Japan, that's you'll find like maid cafes. So that's
Okay,
where you'll find like women dressed like that, who want you to come in like and get tea or coffee. Um,
interesting. Okay,
but to take that aesthetic, because you look at something like that and you think it's this very like safe, submissive like Japanese woman thing, but then they just
right.
go so, but then the music is just so like in your face and loud, and I fucking love it.
Yeah, like you're expecting like this almost like Owl City Fireflies sing-songy sort of thing, and then just boom, it's like Metallica, but like just kind of more melodic.
Yeah, that's actually not a bad way to describe it. Um, yeah, dude, you're absolutely welcome, and I will check out some of the stuff that you mentioned. And I don't know if you saw this joke, but this will be the one thing to close out. Do you know when All Time Low's new album comes out?
I do. It's on April 3rd. I saw something that in light of COVID-19, they're gonna be releasing more of the songs leading up to it, which is really cool. I admire bands that are just like, look, it's a weird time. Let's just get stuff out there for the people to listen to.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. So something that I thought of, and I think I texted you this. I haven't heard any of the interviews that they've done. I don't know if they've described this album as like introspective or mature, but I think that there's a kit for when bands want to go in a slightly different direction of that style. They all start playing Telecaster Deluxe Customs. The Telecaster
God, isn't it the truth?
the,
It's
the
that's so true. They do.
They all start playing
Um,
the Telecaster with the humbuckers, and then the chorus pedal comes out.
Yeah, no, my guess is with this album, it'll just be kind of, I think Alex described, um, so like he described sleeping in as kind of like drinking lemonade. And I think the whole album is going to be kind of something that everyone just wants to dance to, is like the gist that I'm getting. But um, I think they already did their introspective album with Last Young Renegade because that was like really like exploring with synths almost like too much. And I think if any indication has come from some kind of disaster and sleeping in, they have returned a little bit to like the punk rock bridge, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, and the choruses have guitars, and they're doing like a there's like a slightly different amper sound, but I'm here for it also. Alex, Jack, if anybody of you are listening to this, love to chat with you.
Oh yeah.
Dude, thank you so much for taking time to talk to me. I apologize that I didn't think to ask you to do the show before this.
Oh no, no, I literally had the thought of like since he's looking for people to like be on the show, I was just like, well, I've got like like less to do than I usually do. Why don't I just offer to do it? But no, and then really quickly too, I told you I was gonna do this. I want to give a shout out to Maddie. Maddie, if you're listening, hello.
Awesome. Hi, Maddie. Leo's a great guy. I've known him for a long time. Something I don't know if this applies to you, but is there anything that we can plug before we get out here, Mr. Quinn?
I mean, I'm not as hip and with it. I'm not even like on freaking TikTok. Like I barely know what it is. So I'm kidding. I do kind of know what it is. I'm just trying to be like comical and dry humorous.
Sure,
No, but
sure.
I think if there's one thing I want to say to your listeners, it's that let's see here. In the midst of this whole thing, um, one that's really is the world of podcasting and creativity and community is, I think, more essential than ever. So whether it's listening to Between Awesome and Disaster, supporting Will on his Patreon, or giving attention to people who are kind of the engine of the local economy, this is a really good time to do that. And also, like, call your family, say hi to them, and yeah, don't be a stranger and read a book. Reading is really good for you, and it's a lot of fun. And yeah, read that book that you've been meaning to read for a long time. It'll be good for you.
Excellent, man. I think that's a great way to close this out. And I'll hold on. Let me turn my video on real quick just so I can give you a proper goodbye.
Oh, little shout out, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Oh, there he is. Look at you, all with your microphone and your fellow hipster glasses. Nice.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for doing this, man. And I'll call you again soon. We can talk off mic also.
Sounds good to me. Thanks for the invitation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man. Have a good night.
Likewise.
Okay, folks, that's our show for this week. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Leo, for your time. I appreciate you, man. If you guys enjoyed this and feel like you know someone else who might want to listen to the show as well, we are available on Apple, Stitcher, and Spotify. And if you want to get a free month of Stitcher Premium when you sign up, you can use the promo code awesome all caps. That's a way to help support out the show as well. Get access to hundreds of comedy albums, ad-free archives, a lot of stuff, and a lot of great stuff to listen to enjoy, and to get you through this time. Thank you guys again, as always, for being here. I hope I hope you stay safe. I hope if you unfortunately are still going to work, that you're doing whatever you can to protect yourself and protect those around us. It's still weird, but if you're able to, and if you've got something that you've never had the time to do, maybe now would be a good time to do it, and make sure that you reach out to your friends, because that's what I'm trying to do, and I'm doing it through this podcast, but I'm doing it off the mic as well. So I hope you guys stay safe out there, and I will see you guys next time between Awesome and Disaster. Stay safe, everybody.